Hi guys, I'm Imagery
And I'm Mehak.
and welcome to another episode of All About That Reef.
So for today's episode, we'll be talking about the world of underwater photography. And as usual, we have a really cool guest joining us. But before we speak to him, we wanted you to hear some of our thoughts. Just starting off, thinking about conservation these days, and the conversation always comes up with the importance of storytelling and what is the role that storytelling can play for conservation, for preservation. And I think photography is one of those tools of storytelling, right? Because it can be used to document changes, it can be used to document impacts, it can really provide a different perspective and sort of help people see a world that they would never otherwise be exposed to. So, Angry, what are some of your thoughts on photography as a mechanism of conservation awareness?
I think the reason that I wanted to have this podcast and bring this subject or topic up was also the fact that how important it is. And I don't know if it has impacted you, but any picture or video I see of the underwater world will impact me in some way or the other. As of recent, did you see that picture of this whale and its eye?
Yeah.
And that really hit home. I was mind blown as the fact that this particular diver went through so much of challenges to take that video, and not because of how she took it, but also because that whale was dying, and that was the kind of eye that whale had while it was dying.
Yeah. I think it's really cool that you bring up that picture. Actually, is because people saw this picture, because people saw the eye. They also somehow, even though they've never seen the whale, they don't know anything about. They don't even know what the whole of the whale looks like, but they formed an emotional connection with this whale. So when that whale died, you could see that people were actually moved, and all these emotions were elicited by this one picture that the world saw.
Exactly.
So that really does show the power of photography in sort of, again, in not in just telling a story, but in sort of evoking emotion, right? I think a lot of what I know of what underwater looks like has come through images, has come through videos. And I love also watching, when sometimes OceanX sends down those submersibles, and through photography and underwater videography, we now know what things 2,000 meters down look like. Like yesterday, I think I saw a video of a nautilus that was filmed near the Philippines. I'm not too sure exactly where, but I would never have thought, I would never be able to in my lifetime see a nautilus swimming right in its natural environment. And now through this video, I was able to see that. So it really does
create a huge impact.
Yeah, and grant access, right?
Definitely. To this alien space that some people might have the opportunity to go under and see, but there are a lot of people, a population of people who have not even stepped foot onto a beach or touched the sea kind of thing.
Yeah, and also even if they do dive, and even if they can go, even if they do live by the ocean, because of how vast it is, because of how sort of deep it goes, because of how little light there is down under there, there's always going to be spaces that people aren't going to be able to visit. There are going to be spaces that most of the ocean is unexplored. Most of the ocean, people have zero idea what it looks like. So it's really a cool tool that sort of brings the ocean to people.
Even when you speak about conservation, recently they put the longest running underwater time lapse, which was about 612 days, and it showed the this particular area that they did this time lapse. I think it was in Florida, and how bleaching happened within those 612 days. It was a brain coral, and you can clearly see the difference. I mean, that makes a huge impact, and people keep talking about coral bleaching and things like that, but no one has really seen the difference, like from color it going to pale white. I mean, we've only seen a difference between color and pale white, but it going from that to that.
The sort of transition.
Yeah,
and I think that's like, again, like thinking of photography as a snapshot in time, thinking of photography as like a historical record, as an archive of what was there before, what is there now, and then sort of seeing how that changes as time passes. So that's really cool. But sort of bringing it to Sri Lanka, I think we know of like a number of wildlife photographers in Sri Lanka, but I think
no underwater photographers.
I wouldn't say no. I think we do have some underwater. We're speaking to one today, but yeah, there are relatively few underwater photographers in Sri Lanka. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this episode I think is interesting because of that. I mean, it would entice someone to get into underwater photography. It could also like change people's perspective on like how diving could also be something that helps conservation, and it's not just about like you doing it recreationally. Most people start diving and then they do it as a hobby just because it's fun and things like that, but then later on they get into it and then they realize that like a picture that they take can have an impact, or like the way they like dive can have an impact, and all of that matters in the end, you know.
And I think just thinking about like underwater photography, there are so many challenges that are associated with it, right? Like already capturing the perfect shot on land has so many factors, right? There's so much, and it's already like that's already hard enough to do. Exactly. But then when you factor in that this is happening underwater in a completely like alien space that you're not able to navigate so freely, in a space where there's no light, right? Like how does photography work in a space and where you actually can't see, and where the colors get absorbed differently, and then where you're not even in full control of your movement, like you move with like the currents, and then you also obviously have that factor of like you don't know what marine life you're going to see down there. So there's just I think a much larger range of factors that play into you getting that perfect shot and you being able to tell that story. So for me, I think underwater photography is all the more reason impressive for that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like I really do believe in like storytelling through like art, and how photography has a huge impact in the society, in our society that we live in, with social media and like everyone posting pictures of something or the other, and like someone learning from it and caring for the environment is very important. And I think that's something that I have done as well. I mean, I've seen pictures and I've changed from it, kind of thing. Even when I see like pictures of pollution and like videos of people picking trash up from like 30 meters below, like all of that affects
I think
you.
I think the thing is, you never know what emotion the story is going to have. Like you never know what reaction a person's going to have seeing that, and that also like adds that nice touch, right? Like you always have room to inspire, room to inform, room to educate through pictures. But yeah, I think today's guest will be able to tell us a lot more as like one of Sri Lanka's few underwater photographers, and sort of having experience doing underwater photography, but also having some experience with, you know, people using his underwater photography to tell different kind of stories. I think I'm really excited to hear everything that he has to share with us.
I think we'll bring the guest in now. Shout out to Pass It On for sponsoring this episode.
And now we're back. Today we're joined by Manjula Wijeyaratne. He's one of Sri Lanka's few underwater photographers, and he's known widely for his pictures of shipwrecks and reefs around Sri Lanka.
Hi Manjula.
Hello, good to meet you.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. And
thank you. I'm happy. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So most people know you as a chartered architect, but in the diving community, you're better known as an underwater photographer. So tell us a bit about how you started diving and what sparked your interest in underwater photography.
So, for me, if I go back long time ago, I was a swimmer, and therefore I was a surf lifesaver there. So I have had an affinity to the water and the sea. Right? And then prior to that, during my school holidays, etc., parents took us out of Colombo all the time. And my mom, being a teacher in the marine sciences, she took us walking on the reefs, on the shore reefs. So without me knowing, I had like a grounding, like a background teaching to understanding the little coral lives and that kind of thing. So that gave me. So come back, leave school, whatever. I did a holiday in Australia in early 2000, and then somebody who swims, who goes to Australia and doesn't go to the Barrier Reef,
Yeah.
right? And here I go, and I did a DSD,
Okay.
discovery scuba diving, in the Barrier Reef, in the most coral life of the world, right?
Yeah.
And it just opened up in front of me. All these big fish, the color and all that. And the DSD, fantastic. Came back, straight to Hikkadua, did my course, and there was no looking back. But I took about 2 years, a good 5 years of diving before I took a camera. So I was in like a perfect place to take a camera, be, how buoyancy control and all that things. So that's how I got into it. Now though, I see a little bit of my architecture influencing me, because I understand the wreck, its place, etc. And that's how I
Cool.
did it.
So obviously underwater photography has like its unique set of challenges, like more so I would say than land photography, like looking at things like visibility, the sort of marine life and how much they move, but also like lightning. So what are some challenges that you've had to face when sort of starting underwater photography, and also just currently as you sort of navigate the underwater environment when you're taking your pictures?
So that is very interesting, right? So there's two sides to it. I take it as a day-to-day affair, where if it's bad visibility, so be it. And then I put it myself into that mindset. So everything thereafter becomes positive. So if I see from me to Ayindri, it's positive. If I see from here to Gold Road, it's positive. So same with marine life, both of which nobody can control, because it's the sea, it's a nature, and it's the way of life in the sea. So I just take it on that. So on a good visibility day, I will take my wide angles, etc. On a bad visibility day, if it's a wreck, I'll try and see whether I can take silhouettes, etc. Or go macro, get close-ups, get the divers into the frame, so that I give context. If it's bad fish day, so the bad fish day to me is a bit of a sad day, because it's like a building without humans, right? So it's like empty spaces, and it's like, so it's kind of thing. But then I'll find some kind of subject that will work into it and give the photograph there. There are some days that I just take the photograph, tuck it in, or rather the camera, tuck it in, and just
Enjoy
the
there
diving.
and that, be there in the place. It's like, be there. So be in place, be aware, get your senses going to that place.
I think you highlighted a really important point there, being like every time you go into the ocean, like you're going for a wildlife encounter, you're going into like a natural space where these variables aren't really in your control. So just like you would go on like a safari to Yala or any other sort of wildlife
Correct.
encounter you would do, you just have to lower your expectations. If not, like it's only gonna leave you disappointed.
Absolutely.
If not.
So I'm glad that you brought this up, where you mentioned that the cameras that you use I mean, well, you didn't bring it up, but I want to bring it up, so that the camera enthusiasts would be a bit more interested, whoever is listening, to understand what kind of cameras you use, and is there any particular gear that you have and that is different to land
most
photography?
Okay, so if I go, what's the difference between land photography and rather the catch? So essentially the main difference is the strobe or the flash and the housing.
Okay.
The camera itself is a standard camera, whether it be a point and shoot, SLR, mirrorless, all of it. It's the same camera, but it's a housing.
Yeah.
So I started with a very basic, but there were minor controls, so that semi-manual kind of point and shoot. So it was essentially the size of your phone.
Okay.
Right? And it shot only JPEG, for those who understand JPEG, RAW, etc. So I had very minimal control and the standard flash that goes in. But I figured I had an eye. Not boasting myself, but I figured I had an eye for myself, for my photographs. And that gave me something, but I used it for about a good 5 years, just enjoying. So if I take my diving life, I've dived for 5 years without a camera. Then I took a basic camera and I was running with that. So it was single handheld, always still being in place rather than trying to focus like that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's two, how would you say, it's two eyes. The eye of that versus just seeing with your natural eye and being in place and being aware and enjoying the moment.
Yeah.
Then, so that was a basic camera. Then I upgraded. Around 2015, I upgraded. I went completely manual, but still a point and shoot that shot raw. Okay. Of course, the housing. Then I added a strobe, so that's the external flash. And then I added what is called a wet lens, so external lens, which gave me wide angle. That was the game changer for me, right? Because by which time I figured more than going macro, I prefer the wide angle.
Yeah.
So the big picture kind of thing. And that completely changed the photograph. So the ones that I and the rest of Colombo or the newer divers enjoy are what I've been using with that. Because that flash, to get technical, if you use the inbuilt flash, that will, in water, it will light up a maximum of meters, so from me to I3, right? That strobe, the external flash on the new camera, would light up from me to, say, 3 meters or 10 feet. But that same strobe on land would light up 100 feet or 30 meters. So that's the kind of power that is kind of lost in water, right? But that 3 meters of lighting in water makes a huge difference to your photograph. Because the coral life which you see at that 3-meter distance is now back in full reds and blues and the whole colors that we see underwater, right? So that made a big difference. And then of course a wide angle. So when it came to wrecks, the wide angle lens was like stunning. It just shows the whole ship. A ship which is like 3 floors, 4 floors tall, now you see it in single frame without having to move back a lot. So it gives a lot of context. Even the forget about wrecks, come to the reef, it still shows a whole lot. And so my preference for wide angle was there.
You
I
had
think
the choice.
it can also be related to my architecture because you tend to see a building. You don't look at a building with a keyhole image kind of thing, right? You look at it. So that's where it probably came from. So contextual kind of thing. What do you see in this little space? So even when I do close-up shots of a little nudibranch kind of thing, I tend to take the whole context. So somebody who understands the story or the story I'm going to say, this tiny fellow, he lives in this area, you know, that's this environment and kind of thing. So that's how it came about, and I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Now I've got another lens, which is a macro. I'm beginning to enjoy that too.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. It is.
So, just how you mentioned how there's different gear that you use for underwater photography, you also mentioned how like the practicality of it, where you first started with a camera that you could only just you could tuck it in whenever you wanted to, and that would help you with like buoyancy and like diving technicalities as well. So I think that difference between like land photography and underwater photography is like things like that you need to consider as well, in case there's a really bad current, and how you would navigate that, and also like looking at the colors that you see underwater. You see most of the colors on land, but blue is probably like the most prominent color that you see, and like reds and oranges are out of the
spectrum.
When you go deeper and deeper. So it's interesting how you mentioned like all of that. I mean, like, it's very technical as well.
Yeah, and it seems that there's so much more to think about than you would if you were just
exactly.
like, I also can't do land photography in any sense of the way. So like I was like, I'm actually surprised that there's so many other elements that, you know, a normal person wouldn't even consider. But something that stood out to me when you just spoke is that you said, you spoke about a story, you spoke about giving some context, whether you're taking a shipwreck or a wide angle, or if you're going close up and taking a picture of a nudibranch. So what does that process look like? Like, what does your storytelling process look like, and what is the story that you usually try to convey to your audience through your pictures?
Interesting. So that varies with each, I guess, context, photograph, etc. So if it's a small animal, then I would like to say this is its home. Right? This is the environment it wishes to live in, kind of thing. But if it's pollution, if I'm taking a polythene bag that is there, 30 meters in the water, again I would try to show not just a bag, I would just try to show the context that where it's gone and lodged in, right? So a kind of a story that I'm going to say, hey guys, you throw a bin up in the top of Hatton, but it's now come down, got lodged in this wreck or reef here, and this is where it gets lodged, and then of course sometimes you get fish tucked in, all kinds of things, the nets. So I try to kind of show a story like that. But if it's like a school of fish on a wreck or on a reef, I try to take it so that it shows again its how it lives. You know how barracudas do that swirl.
Yeah.
So that's like actually that's an epitome of photograph, because it says this is how they live, this is how they attack, this is how they get hold of prey. Right? So each one, on a lucky day, you get a nice photograph, which will tell us a story, and I'll probably say what the story is on that day. You know.
So I have dived with you, and I've seen some of your photographs, and I've seen you capturing some of these photographs as well. And something I've seen is that there's a very like architectural side to it. Like you mentioned, I think because you are a chartered architect by profession, I think you kind of see shipwrecks or reefs in a different, you use your eyes differently to a normal person. Like even like recently, I think you posted a picture of like Perseus, the shipwreck, and the way you had taken it, like I don't think anyone had like looked at it from that angle, and it also like shows how like how ancient it is, and like there's so much of like character to the shipwreck, although it's underwater 40 meters down there, but it tells a story. So just how you mentioned how like if you take a small animal, you show the entire environment that they live in to get an idea as to like how this creature lives and survives underwater. Do you think there's a connection between your profession and what you do with photography? Do you think there's a relationship?
Thank you for the very kind words on the photographs. But this is very thought-provoking, right? So now that you ask, I never thought about it like that. But I think there is a distinct connection. So for me, my buildings always have a thought process. How people live, how people experience the building internally and externally. Okay, so how they live, how they experience, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and this is what it is. So that's my thought process. That creates my architecture. So that therefore reflects on my photograph, because I'm thinking, oh, could be the contours, how the form is seen, the scale, how do I show the scale. A big building you show a certain scale because you humanize it.
Yeah.
Hundreds of feet below, a ship is like so massive, a building is probably half its size. Now how do I show the scale?
Yeah.
Right? Either I would show a fish, either I would show a human being there, or I'd show a bottle which is lying on the ground, on the beach, on the sand there. So yeah, I kind of look through the frame, try to understand, and yeah. So I think there's a distinct correlation between the whole story making of that photograph, and I think architecture therefore brings. So inside the shipwreck is also the same.
Yeah.
There's a space. Now it's a home of not a human being, of some fish or coral. How have they kind of made it their home? It's always a kind of story like that. So yes, there is.
I think it's really cool that you sort of show us how much actually thought that goes into when you're taking your pictures, even though some of it might be like, subconscious and like you not having made the connections yourself. And like Ainri said, like she's seen some of your pictures and they really sort of allow us to see the underwater world in a specific way. And this is actually really important when you think about photography as a tool for conservation, or photography as a tool for education and awareness. Because even though we live in an island that's surrounded by the ocean, there's so many people that don't actually have access to these areas. Like it's like not anyone can go to a shipwreck. Like you need a diving license to go 30 meters down deep, and you also so access to these areas are limited, and that's what photography allows you to do, right? It gives you access into spaces and allows you to live vicariously through the photographer. So thinking along those notes, has there been particular image that you've taken that has sparked inspired this kind of action or education or awareness?
I'm actually not 100% sure whether I have a photograph that has sparked awareness in the realm of photography enthusiast kind of thing, right? But I know there have been one or two photographs of polythene bags and stuff like that which I've posted on social media, and they said, "Are you serious? These bags are there?" I said, that kind of thing, yes. So one of the things I actually try to do is if I do see pollution, that goes very public. So environmentalism, or whatever you want to call that buzzword, right? And that's something there. But I think you're asking in terms of my photography where it has hit. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think starting a conversation on pollution, like that's a thing in itself. And I think that's something so important to highlight, like what you said about like the garbage that you throw in, hot and planes could end up in the ocean. And when you're thinking of these are spaces that humans don't go into, but you have captured human impact in these areas, which is in itself also something really incredible. So yeah, that does answer my question.
Yeah. And also when I don't know whether you understood this in that narrative, but when you mentioned that you're not sure of whether your photography is used in conservation, I think it does. I mean, I think I have even asked you for pictures of like reefs that you've taken from like a while back, let's say about 5 years back. And then when I look at pictures that I have taken of that particular reef as of recent, I will see the destruction that has happened within those few years. So although you don't know of it, I think it has been used for like ways to understand the destruction that has happened, and like ways in which like we have bleached our corals and things like that. Even when looking at like the pictures you've taken of Bar Reef, now when you look at Bar Reef, I mean, half of the coral species that you have taken pictures of don't even exist in those areas. So it is very impactful, and I think underwater photography gives people a very different perspective of like so many things. I mean, for someone who hasn't ever dived at a shipwreck would not understand what a shipwreck is even, like they wouldn't understand the concept of it. But if they see a picture of like an underwater photographer and with a diver to scale, just like how you mentioned how you try to scale like a building with a person, if you scale a shipwreck with a person, you will understand how big of that shipwreck is, including like whales. Like there are so many like body ratios, like body to body ratios of like a shipwreck of a whale and a human, and it just opens your eyes to like a different world,
Thank you. So, yes, my photographs have been probably impactful in that context where you refer to X period of time, compare it to today, and understand where it is.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think it's been impactful, yes, but not a single photograph per se. Where people keep asking, is this Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Or where is this? Are you serious? Colombo is like this?
Yeah.
Those are the questions that come apart, right? And in that sense, yes, it is impactful. They've made people whom I meet, like say, we should have an exhibition, and I'm like, not ambitious like that. So it's there in my computer and social media, but yeah. So yes, it's made an impact for sure, but not a single photograph per se. That's the answer to your question in that context.
So I think stepping a little bit away from photography, actually, it's like just listening to you, it's obvious that you've been doing this a long time. You've been diving a long time. You've seen these ecosystems for a long time. And you've spoken about pollution, we've spoken about bleaching, and just from your personal experience, like how has the environment changed from since when you started diving, or even before that, from since when you used to visit these areas as a child to now when you're capturing these images?
Oh, well, it has changed a lot. It has changed a lot. From my childhood to now, the Hikkaduwa I remember is literally not existent now. Right? So what you see now on the glass bottom boats is essentially rocks. Right? And I remember it in vivid color. It's non-existent. But so that's a long time ago. Come since my diving, which is now roughly about 20 years of diving, I see Bar Reef in a pathetic state, to the point that I kind of don't bother to go there. The first time I saw Bar Reef, which would have been mid-2000s, it was stunning. There were sharks swimming around, even in that depth of water, right? It's just snorkeling depth.
Yeah.
It's sharks swimming around. Now, that entire reef is on the sand bed. The last time I went there was about, so just say pre-COVID, so 2018-ish, the whole staghorn coral reef was on the ground. So I just jumped into the water, looked around, and I like, okay, no point being here. In under 3 minutes, I was back on the boat. It was that bad. Right? But I think certain parts are still okay.
Yeah.
Take Colombo, I think there's less of fish life. It's not harmed because there is not dynamiting, so it's in good state there. Take Kirinda or the Basas. There was way more fish life when I first dived in 2000, again 5, 6, 7, somewhere there. Lots of more fish left. Now when you go, there's hardly any fish left, right? So, yeah, so there is a distinct big impact, distinct difference.
I actually love asking this question because this is something I discussed actually in our very first episode of the shifting baselines theory, which talks about how with every generation there is a loss of like memory. So there's a loss of understanding of what came in the generations past. But only when we speak to people that have been diving for generations, that have seen the ocean over 20 years, and when we hear them speak and hear them talk about the oceans and the ecosystems they've been to, that you actually hear about how much loss has happened and how sad that loss actually is. And I think this brings us to like a really interesting point over here, is like photography, underwater photography in this instance, is actually something that we can use for like to combat the sort of tragedy that comes along with the shifting baselines theory, right? Is that because you're capturing moments in time,
Correct.
You can actually document that loss. You can actually document what the impact has been over time and use that to sort of tell a story. You can use that to inspire action, and you can actually use that to highlight the destruction of the environment that people have caused.
Definitely.
So it really always just, I always end up asking people this question because to me it's something that's very personal, and I just love hearing the answers no matter how disheartening it is, because it's always the answer is always one of loss. Like nobody has actually come and answered and been like, oh, it's actually the corals have improved or like it has even stayed the same. It's always a story of loss.
The only place probably corals might improve is on a wreck, because it grows.
Yeah.
It's a new place, right? A shipwreck, that would have happened, I would say again, in the recent past. Say in the year 2000 and onwards, if there's a wreck, then there is new life.
Yeah.
So there is a growth there.
Yeah.
But on the big picture, no. So the answer, my comment to yours is photographs gives you a timeline.
Yeah.
Right? So that timeline is a measurement of life, whether it be coral or fish. So that will show you. Now, if I actually had this system when I first dived in Kirinda in 2005, and I had photographs, that would have seen hundreds of fish. To now going and seeing only the landscape, which is, it's stunning on its own, it's stunning as a photograph, but when it's lifeless, it's a bit
disappointing.
sad. Yeah, it's very sad.
But sort of thinking along this line and sort of going along this narrative, a lot of photographers like to highlight the marine life, the sort of vibrancy of the ecosystems. But you mentioned that sometimes when you see pollution, you always take a picture of it because it starts that conversation. Are there any other threats in the marine ecosystem that you have sort of observed, and like have you documented those threats in any way? Like it could be bleaching, I think is a good example, but anything else that if like I don't know, come across people spearfishing or any sort of other sort of challenges to the marine environment that you've been able to document?
to document a threat, I think, is a bit of a tricky one. The main document is essentially the human. The main threat is the human being, right?
As always.
So, so that threat is either the guys are overfishing, so the nets. Spearfishing, yes, but it is species oriented. So in the big picture, the other one is the dynamite fishing. And for a long time, a group of us was very, very proactive in reporting to the Navy and the Coast Guard the dynamite fishing groups, and we were constantly getting results. But the system in Sri Lanka is the drawback in it. So what I have been able to record in photographs is actually not, apart from nets, what we called ghost. Yeah. So apart from those, I can't record dynamite fishing, because either they will not, or if they do dynamite, I will not live. I will also die in that time. In terms of spearfishing, when I was chair of the Sabakwa Club, we managed to bring the anti-spearfishing legislation into power. Right? So I'm not going to take credit to it. It's a Sabakwa Club who spearfish. Right? But yes, that kind of thing. But that's kind of probably not today's topic, because it's more photography oriented.
But yeah, it's interesting that we had this conversation as well, because first of all, I think you should do an exhibition. This is the perfect opportunity for you to do like before and afters of all the reefs or wrecks that you've taken, and I think it'll like give a huge impact towards when you look at the timelines of how you've taken these pictures. But also on a ending note, what would you what kind of advice would you give someone who's just starting into underwater photography? What kind of gear that they should start with, and what kind of impact they should, or what kind of story they should show through their photography?
Okay, that's a long story. So, no, it is, right? Because there's lots to answer. First thing is, well, photography is an art, right? So whether it's for yourself or other myself like me, or whether you want to be a pro at it, you're anyway going to communicate a story. That's the photographer. But so where to start? My first thing to any diver is do not take the camera for a good 30, 40, 50 dives, which doesn't happen, but that's right. Because I think one needs to master the diving skills. Simple things like buoyancy is ultra. You probably have seen me, because I didn't realize when I'm taking a photograph, because my gear is heavy, I can't control, right? So I had to control my particular place, not with my hands,
with your breathing.
with my breathing. So how do I do that? So I have to be in perfect place that, right. So I have to get there. A similar example, if I bring it to land, sniper shooters, or even the recreation, the shooters at Olympics. Their focus is such that they actually fire in between the heartbeat. If not, it misfires. Right? So that is that level of. I'm not saying I'm going there, but all I'm saying is, you have to get your buoyancy sorted out.
Yeah.
The next one is your finning, because if you're going to carry a camera like that, all you have got is your fins. So whilst you're like this. Now you have to turn this way, that way, go up, go down. So all with this, right?
Yeah.
So you get so your basics are that. So once you get those two sorted, yes, now take your camera and go, enjoy. The other one, of course, is to get your eye. So to get your eye in, again, I think the first 20, 30, 40, 50 dive will get your awareness and the presence into place. So that is because if you are aware, then you can see there's fish there, there's life here, there's something happening here. So your awareness is kind of getting in. So you enjoy the dive.
Yeah.
The presence obviously is presence, and then good. So then you know, okay, that's a nice frame. That's a nice frame. That's a nice frame. That's when the camera starts coming in.
Yeah.
Before that, I think you are just going to take, hey, I'm going to dive here. I need to take photographs.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one side of it. The other side of it is whether you like still or whether you like video. So that's a choice. For which, I think, for either of which, you probably start with a basic point and shoot or a GoPro. Play with both of them and see which you like. Right? And then you upgrade to a bigger gear. Because even videography needs good lights. Like this one, which is getting me to sweat a lot. With ultra strong lights, it's actually, videography lights are stronger than photography or still photography lights.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that in terms of equipment,
And gear.
today there's heaps of options, check online, but essentially get your diving skills sorted out and then get to understand whether you like still, video. There was one more in your question.
The impact that they can create through their pictures.
So that's the artistry, the artist in the individual. So what kind of stories you want to say, that's, I think, the photograph or the video is going to go and do. That's each person's innate ability and how they like to say. I think that's theirs, the artist in that person.
Okay. I mean, thank you. I think this conversation was very interesting, at least for me.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I think I
Thank
can
you
take
for
some
having
tips
me.
on her own underwater photography now.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think this was like a really valuable conversation for us, and a little bit of like a flip side of like all the different like aspects that go into underwater photography and to telling this story
And into conservation.
and into conservation as well, and how like while it's just a picture, like you know, a picture, what's the quote, like a picture's worth 1,000 words or something like that.
Yeah.
So like
It
how
is.
really so much can be communicated through photography, and what a
Definitely.
great tool it can be. So thank you so much.
I should
And I
compliment you all on your work, and I'm really on her work.
Thank
Marine
you.
biologist, conservationist. Yes.
And I hope this entices at least one person to start underwater photography and create an impact through conservation.
Yeah, and also do the sort of timeline documenting
Yes,
thing that we
definitely.
Yes.
mentioned.
So in that context, I think, so for me it's a hobby.
Yeah.
For a person like that, the science, timelining is very important. So there is a
Yeah.
way of doing that, and which can be boring. But still, if you have your artistic sense, probably can make a pretty picture and still timeline it.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes, my example would be probably cargo wreck. Right? I do certain shots of its bow and its stern every year.
Really?
Yeah, just for my kicks, right?
Yeah.
So, and Perseus, right? So, and because those are big wrecks, you don't see big differences. and it's difficult to see the life growth because it's a 20-meter tall bow, right? So
Yeah.
in a wide angle shot, you're not going to see the coral growth, but I do it. I do it
Interesting.
just. So that's something any starting person can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who listened. We hope this inspires you to explore underwater photography.
See you on the next one. This podcast is a Creator Cast production.